Ladies and gents, this should be the most comprehensive buy, hold, sell for NRL Fantasy you'll get on a weekly basis. I'm going through from the highest priced player that is on people's minds right now, and that is Payne Haas, all the way down to the cheapies in order. So if you do need to skip through, or if you want to find anyone, there's a lot of people in this, so I'm not going to go through and do timestamps, but you can just skip through. I'll go from the 700s to 600s all the way down. So big appreciation for you guys for jumping in here. We deep dive into the stats and I give my opinion on these players. And if you are interested in my rankings on buys this week, I've already given that to the private crew, and that's an added addition to what you get here. And obviously this big video and podcast there. Thanks so much, guys. Please subscribe and follow along on YouTube and podcast. For Payne Haas at 844k, he is going to be plenty of fun to watch. My goodness, what an incredible effort it was from Payne Haas last week in 49 minutes. For him to come out and be that dominant is absolutely incredible. 81 in 49 minutes. And we know he has a lot of this in his game. And the big thing in what we saw in that first game compared to last year, he had one game last year where he beat that offload count. He had 5 in his last game of the year and picked up a 91. So in other games, he has 0, he has 1, he has 2, he has 3. And you very much want to hope that if you are playing the Broncos as a team, that you do wrap the ball up, because if he gets that arm free, he's usually commanding sort of 3 defenders. And if he's one-on-one with a player, he's either going to score or set one up, like we saw with Corey Pakes there on the weekend. 81 for him. And we know that he is a mid-60s guy, and usually in the first bunch of rounds scores really, really well. Last year he copped the injury, but in round 1 last year he picked up a 76 and played bigger minutes. And I don't think that 49 minutes will be his normal stint. So Payne Haas, if you are interested and do have the cash available to trade up, then I definitely think that Payne Haas is a guy that you may want to look at coming into round 2. If you're sitting there with maybe a 700k guy, or an injury, and you can upgrade, downgrade with a couple of mid-ranges, and you left 150k, like that's probably the only kind of way, given majority of the guys that are available at a pretty good price. Like we've got Nicho Hynes to talk about next, and even he comes up against the Cowboys, and most people would say, oh, he's an easy guy that you can sell to Payne Haas. But against Cowboys and Rabbitohs over the next few weeks, Nicho, with that tough start at 41, I think the attack will come in the next few weeks, and he could be a really good guy to hold, but he could also be the guy that you do move to someone like Payne Haas. An absolutely damaging player, and yeah, you could definitely do worse than trying to get Payne in your side. And obviously, value-wise, like he's already at 844k, which puts him priced at about a 63, and you're not buying him for the straight-up value, you're buying him for the points and for him to be a really good captaincy option. Nicho Hynes there, as I said, I think is a pretty solid hold this week. Obviously the kick meters aren't going to be there as much as they have been, and you do hope that the goals return, because if they put up a score this week, that could be sort of 12 to 14 points in goals that you're missing out on with Nicho. With a break even that's not absolutely ridiculous in the mid 70s, he's a guy that could easily come out and hit you a 75-80 and be one of the top scorers of the week. In other thoughts, if you want to go the contrary, I think that he's an easy guy that you can sell this week and spread that cash around your side. And if you obviously haven't got Cleary, then make sure you do have Cleary, and Hynes can go to Nath this week. Don't feel like I have to talk about Nath as a buy in this section, but make sure you do own him. He's majority owned, obviously, and guys like Terrell May, please make sure that you do fix that. I saw he's up by about 1%. He should be owned by every single person in the game, so make sure you do get Terrell May. But I imagine everyone listening and watching this video will have him in their side. So Nicho Hynes, a pretty interesting option this week. When we look on to DCE, he had a tremendous game with 78 in round 1, and obviously they come up against a couple of easier opponents over the next few weeks. Warriors, with Canberra being a harder one, into Parramatta. So 2 out of the next 3 games shouldn't be too bad for him, but kick meters are down, and a lot of their play is going to be down down the left hand side, kicking, especially with Luke Brooks, and we know how much that kicking in general play can affect our players in fantasy. And if you look at DC in the back end of last year, there were some good games for sure, but he did have 27, with 268 kick meters, and he had 3 games in a row there where those kick meters were down. And when you have weapons on both sides, and obviously with Lehigh Hopewadi on that left-hand side with Kohler, there are some weapons there as well. When Tommy Turbo is in the squad, usually DCE, you'll have good games, but Turbo takes a bit of that attack as well, and it's going to be hard. You're going to be hard-pressed to see him improve on, obviously, what he did last game and scoring a try, a couple of line breaks, 2 try assists as well, with limited missed tackles. You won't see that every week. And at 749 now, he's priced in the mid-50s, and I can't see him hitting sort of near that 60 mark on a regular basis, especially when he comes up against some of those harder teams coming up. So I think DCE, not someone that you do want to have a big target on, and there are people that are jumping into him this week, and I think it's probably somewhat of a mistake longer term, but obviously short term he should do completely fine. But just on the who's hot and who's not list, we do have Metcalf down 10.5%. Munro is definitely a sell with the injury, and we'll get through all the other guys on this list. And I didn't mention Jackson Purdue. I haven't got him in the section yet, but he's easily a guy you can hold. But I understand if you do want to move him on to another cash cow to facilitate some quicker gains, because the start of the season is a very important time to get cash cows right. But we're going to get into Toa. He's at 4.6%. Gilbert's at 3.9%. Tamale 3.5%. Goz at 3.4%. Payne Haas, we just went through at 3.17%. And we'll get through the other guys on this list as well. So stick around to find out about all those guys. So moving on to Hopgood. He obviously picked up a 47 on the weekend in 72 minutes. He did have 5 missed tackles and a penalty in a game that was very much dominated by the Melbourne Storm. So for Jermaine, I think there's a world where he goes 73 this week is my prediction that I've got on Jermaine. And I'm excited to see it happen against the Tigers. And I do think against the Dogs, against Manly, against Dragons, Canberra, Tigers, the next 6 matchups that he does have, I think he can score really, really well. So I'm excited to see Hopgood. And for those that didn't buy him last week, he drops a little bit in price, given he started at 743 and down 12k with not a very high break even. I do think he beats that break even this week, and the way that they've named their bench and who they've got on there, expect Hopgood to play the big minutes again. And he very rarely misses a lot of tackles. That was his highest since 2023 in round 1 and round 2, where he had 82 and 85. Just remember that as well, with 7 missed tackles and 5 missed tackles. He had his offloads like he normally does. Tackles were still there. He still ran the footy 115 metres. There was no attacking stats, and the minutes were perfect. And if he gets anywhere near 72 minutes, I expect that to be a tremendous points tally next week, closer to the mid-60s. But I'm predicting 73 against the Tigers. So I think Hopgood, a really, really good guy to even potentially look to buy soon, to be honest with you. Yes, they have the buy. They miss round 8. But he should be in Origin and the like, but he's a really good guy to have a look at this week. Speaking of guys, great guys to have a look at, it's Jaden Campbell. 722k with the half and the wing fullback duel. We finally get to see him and Brimson in action, and it is against the Dogs. And I'll caveat this one with saying that I think the Dogs are going to play pretty well. It is at home in Belmore as well. So with Campbell, you can easily wait a week, and then he comes up against Newcastle, Roosters, Dolphins, Dragons. Obviously, Canberra solid, but into Cowboys following that. So for me, Campbell, I think, is going to be a 60 to 63 type of scorer this year, with the duel and in wing fullback position that is usually pretty volatile. If you can slot Jaden Campbell in there, it's absolutely golden. And when we do look at his efforts at 5'8" in 2024, it's absolutely tremendous. You see an 89 in there, you see mid-60s, and this is with him kicking for 150 odd meters last year, and that will increase at least sort of 100 to 200 there. Anywhere between 3 and 6 points would be awesome. He's priced at the 54, which is fairly high, but with that, a team that should be pretty similar to what they were last year, he's going to have to take a little bit more of the control at 7, and I think, the odd try assist extra will come. He didn't score a tremendous amount of tries. He had some games where he dominated in the try assist landscape, and when he did, he went 60 plus very, very regularly. So Campbell, a really, really good guy to look at for this week. Harry Grant at a 7.11 price point. With him, if you decided to start with him over Watson, I think you have to hold. I understand people wanting to sell given he got 40, but that game was an absolute write-off. Unless you're in all the attacking plays, which he was in one, and he did pick up one line break assist, but he's a big tackler. Yes, he misses tackles, but he did that last year. There will be games where he scores tries, he has line breaks, and has big tackle counts, and has big run meter counts. And the worry with Grant coming into this year is he's had lower meters gain counts in last year and the year before, with the year before that going for 60 points. So for Grant, I think you hold if you decided to start with him. If you didn't start with him, you're not going to buy in the near future anyway. Penrith next week, you knew all this was coming, so you do have to stick steady and hold Harry Grant. Mitch Barnett, it's a really similar situation here, but he doesn't have a bye this week, and he scored 49 in 51 minutes. We have seen games last year where Barnett played massive minutes, and he was awesome going into the 60s and the like. So against Manly, I think this will be a really, really fun clash through the middle, and there can't be a world where he plays 51 minutes next week. For him to basically go a point a minute, if you think there's a world where he gets 60 minutes in here, could get an attacking stat, he could easily hit the mid-60s this week. If you sell him, I think it's a big mistake. With dual position, he's already a little bit cheaper now. After last week, he started at 712, he's down 7k. If you're keen to start with him last week, you should be keen to hold him again. Guys like him, guys like Fisher Harris, should not be in a position where they are being sold. 51 for Fish, 49 for Barnett in floor minutes. They should both be held, and we'll get to Fish in a second. James Tedesco, he's much more of an interesting prospect. Given he comes up against Penrith this week, it's going to be tough. 28 for him last week in a well-beaten side, and they come up against Penrith this week, and it should be a similar result. And we know that Tedesco doesn't play super well, and neither do any outside backs against the Panthers. They are a different outfit this year, the Penrith Panthers, but for Tedesco, I am worried how this is going to play out this week. Following, that's a different story, because you do have the Warriors, Titans, and Rabbitohs, but then it's the Broncos and Penrith again. So he's one that I don't think you should have started with. There is 3.4% that have. If you did start with him, I think you can separate that cash a little bit and go and use him to make some upgrades and downgrades this week. But also be aware that it might not be the best score this week, but the following 3 weeks should be good before a little bit of a tough start again with Broncos and Penrith. Yeah, it's a tough one for Tedesco. I don't think you should have started with him, because Broncos were going to improve, and Penrith first 2 for an outside back is not super ideal. That's Tedesco. It's going to be an interesting one for sure. Amole Olakau'atu. So in a similar boat to DCE, but we kind of know where Olakau'atu is going to be at. He's priced at the 51. He's in a position where up against the easier sides, he will get attacking stats, and he looked absolutely tremendous. We had a game last year, we had 11 tackle breaks, and he did only get 63 in a 90-minute game, which is pretty wild. But when he scores tries, he scores good points. You got 62 there, 70. You've got 56 with a try, 65 with a try, 43. I remember buying him coming into that game. That was not fun before he got suspended. Anyway, Olakau'atu, we know what we're getting from him. He's going to be somewhere near the 50 price point to 54 this year, and you're going to take the good with the bad. He did end up getting an early mark in this one. Could have gone into the 70s. He looked incredible, but the Cowboys were also very, very poor. So Olakau'atu, a great one to if you started with him, but I don't know if you buy him now. Jacob Preston. Speaking of guys that were slightly annoying to start with, it's Jacob Preston at 682k. He obviously drops a little bit in cash as well, 13,000, and that makes him even more of an appealing buy over coming into this week. I expect him to have a really fun big game this week, big tackle numbers. I do expect some attack from him as well, and similar to Hopgood, the game wasn't suited for Preston. When he got the ball in hand, he ended up in great positions. He did have 2 missed tackles and a penalty, and we'll see from him that he's not a big missed tackle guy. It's sort of anywhere between the 0 to 3 in games that you see when he plays good minutes, and he played 80. I fully expect him to be a 50-plus scorer on the regular and have that upside into the 60s. Hopgood, I definitely think is a better guy to have right now with the minutes I do see for him, but Preston I would not be selling coming into this week. Connor Watson, 678k. Obviously, he's the guy that has scored better than Harry Grant. And the worry with him is the team that he's in. How much quality ball is he going to be able to provide for try assists? Is he going to be able to get out and run? Which we didn't see at all in that first game when they got absolutely trounced. But 49 tackles for 1 miss for him. When he did move to that 13 role, when Zach Docker-Clay came on, he was able to run a little bit, get 3 tackle breaks, and get an offload. And he's such an energizer bunny, and good things happen when he has the footy. Great player, dual position, an awesome guy to buy if you didn't buy him this week. And really cool to see our top 100, 1,000, and 5,000 numbers there, with basically 75% of the top 5,000, similar with 1,000 and 100, have him in their side. So a really good guy to own. Penrith this week, how's it going to go? I do think that he's going to get a lot of tackles. Penrith turn everyone back on the inside towards the middle. So he's going to get plenty of work. How cooked is he going to get? He should get 80 minutes for the next bunch of weeks until they get some cattle back, because that bench is so... he's definitely not stacked right now. Very on-demand, and Watson should be getting 80 minutes. And was a great buy in round 1 and still is a good person to have a look at, priced at 50. With Valentine Holmes, he comes up next at 669k. He had a cracking start, 66 for him, with Tuipulotu next to him, scoring 3 tries. And he picked up a try saver as well. Picked up a couple offloads. Defensively was big. Only had only 0 missed tackles in this one. I was saying compared to last year, where he'd always be missing 2 to 4 a game. You see there, especially through the middle and the back end, he was missing plenty of tackles. So defensively looked a lot better on that left-hand side, and it's definitely their focal point in attack. The good news with Val, if you were to buy, is that he's got the Rabbitohs this week. The bad news is that he has a bye next week and Melbourne the following week. So similar to the situation with the Storm, they had a nice one to kick things off, and then it's the bye, and then it is Panthers. So that's a tough one as well. In this case, he's already had the 1 good score. His break-even's a little bit lower, but he is expensive and priced at 50. So you do need to expect good scores going forward. And if you do need a centre, he's a solid option. There's guys like Lucas that you could pick as well. But obviously have a buy coming up as well. Keanu at 654k. We finally get to have a look at him. Last year it wasn't great at the beginning. He then scored tremendously well. He looked great in the Pac Champ stuff in the off-season. I do expect him to average somewhere in the early 50s. He's priced it at 49 after averaging about 47 in that role at fullback last year. But they're taking out, one of those games at least of that 18 at the beginning when he really struggled and the team looked terrible. As we were saying with Campbell, they have a run of really good games following this Dogs and potentially the Knights one. There's a lot of teams that at least there's going to be some points, and that's good for Keanu Kenny at 654k. I personally would go for Campbell before I would go for Keeney, but I think if you like Keanu, it's an awesome pick from round 1. Jai Arrow, he's a fun one at 627k. We always know that he scores well in the back row when he gets that opportunity. The question is going to be what happens to him in his position in the edge when we do see UNA can return in the early rounds and sort of in probably 2 to 3 weeks there. Arrow scored great. He looked awesome. Got a couple of turnover tackles, 42 tackles, no misses. He's a dog. Very, very important player in this side. But what's it going to be when he comes to the middle? We've seen him in games off the bench and sometimes does really well, and then other games he does struggle. I still expect him to probably play close to the 60 minutes when he does play either in the starting prop rotation, in the 13 role, or off the bench. That's the only worry, though, is we don't know exactly where he's going to be. And he's priced at 47. He has to score well. There's probably other guys on this list that are better buys, but I think he was a fun one in round 1. John Bateman, 607k for him, priced at the 45 now. He played really well in round 1, considering the circumstances against the Manly boys. I thought he was awesome with his 57, 44 tackles, 4 misses. I think that's going to be pretty normal for him, sort of high 30s tackles, close to the 40. You'll miss a bunch. It's just who he is. Couple of tackle breaks, the odd offload, 70 to 100 meters. I think will be pretty fair for him, especially if they manage to get more ball. He did have 2 turnover tackles, which is not going to be super regular. I personally expect about a 50 to 52 average for Bateman going forward. And is that enough for you to buy him? Probably not, but if you started with him, you're happy with him. And I have seen a few people like, oh, do I go Bateman to Gilbert, Bateman to Horsburgh. And I'm like, bruh, keep steady. Bateman scored 57. He scored the exact same as Horsburgh. You could beat him again this week, so we don't know. We don't know how that's going to play out, but he's a really good guy to have in your side. Fisher Harris, he's almost 12% owned, and he's a player that is obviously very impressive in his own right. 46 minutes for him last year. You can see he does build throughout the season once he gets back into a groove, and there are games where he needs to play bigger minutes. That wasn't the case here in round 1. What was a win for his game was the tackle breaks at 5, and the meters gained was well into the hundreds. So we saw, to start the year last year, it was a bit slow, and he really built from there. For him in this one, he still had an error, he still had a penalty and a missed tackle, and he was over a 1 ppm. You really want him to get to 50 to 53, 55 minutes, and if he does, I think he can easily hit regular early 50s, and in that case, would be silly to trade him. You definitely want to hold on to him until they're buy, and then you can make a decision on Fish from that point if you want to do an upgrade, if there's someone cheaper that can do a really good job for you as well. So Fish, I think you hold. I don't think you sell him to Horsburgh, which is what we saw Mitch doing. So if you want to check out Mitch's thoughts on his side and some different thinking around trades and the conversation that he had with Matt, who came just outside the top 100 with myself a couple of years ago, that was awesome. Go check that out, the Mitch and Matt masterclass on the channel a couple of videos back. And then Scoops just popped out his video as well, so go and check that one out. A big thanks to all you guys for expanding your repertoire, listening to other people on my channel as well as jumping in and listening to myself. So thank you for that. Kaipi's Paul, 601k. A few people are mentioning him. If you started with him, happy days. He had that nice upgrade from 44 to 52. He picked up 2 offloads. He also had a couple of errors as well. So for him, I think he can continue to go near that 50 mark, and he should get the 80 minutes going forward. And similar to Bateman, they are priced the same, and probably expecting him to be somewhere near that early 50s. And is that enough to bring into your side? It's probably not at this point. Ruben Garrick, I think his scoring of 55 is great to see. It was a pretty slow first half for him, but base stat wise, he can be really, really good. And you'll have games where he has a couple of missed tackles. You have a game where he does have more, but for him to go 17-1 was a really big win. He's owned by 42% of the top 5,000 as well. So if you are interested in him, I think that he has a nice run of games for a few weeks, and it does get a little bit more difficult, especially on their left side of Melbourne is a little bit better than their right side defensively. You've got Cronulla, which is going to be fun, and then you've got Dragons and obviously Penrith before their bye. So I think you had to start with him. It's hard to buy him now. I do expect him to go well this week also, and probably well against the Parramatta Eels as well. But I think you had to start with him. I think it's generally where my thoughts are at him. Near 600k, he had a little bit of value. It's hard to buy him. You're buying him as a straight up keeper, and they do have a tough run, and then a buy in sort of 7 weeks, which is still far enough away. But I think you missed out on one of their good scores and one of their easier games, and then you're going from there. All right, Stefano, we need to talk about at 582k. As I was saying with that game, it's a bit of a write-off for anyone who was looking for base stats. And if you weren't in the attack, like Stefano wasn't, they really shut up shop in that last 15 minutes when he came back on as well. He picked up a 31 there. And PPM-wise, it's not great considering he has a 0.92. But again, it was the base stats was the problem. He comes up against the bye this week and then has Penrith the following week. And at 582k, if you wanted to switch him to Horsburgh, I would do that every day of the week. Pretty simple one. in my boat, just with getting ahead of the pack. And I think it might take Stefano a little bit to get into things, especially now that he's got through that easier clash and has the bye now, but then Penrith following. And I think the run of games after that will be great. And that St. George to Tigers little run of 7 games, I think he'll probably score 2 to 3 tries and be great. But can you hold him through this tougher stint to begin? That's going to be the big question mark with Stefano. Corey, the Red Horsburgh, 566k. And I didn't mention Hosking. I don't think Hosking's a buy. I think he'll be fine this week. And the following week, Joe Tarpanay is out and they need some middle forwards. So I do expect Matty Nicholson to play in the middle forward rotation and Simi Sasangi to take that 15 minutes or so off our boy Hosking there. And we probably see Tom Starling come back on for a little stint through the middle or stay in the middle for a little bit and come off there as well. Hosking could obviously come in and play a little bit of middle as well. Very, very good defender. and can have hit ups as well, which is sweet. But I don't expect any less minutes than what we got last week. And if we do, then if it is near 60 or something and he gets a 40, then we can reassess from there. But I don't think Hosking is a buy. You had to start with him, in my opinion. Horsburgh, different story. Played 59 minutes, and I do expect something very similar in this upcoming week. Had good run meters at 123, picked up the 3 offloads, and I expect that to continue going forward. He is an offloading machine when things go right for him, and you saw in 2023, he really came into his own when he moved to lock, which is the role he is playing right now for this Raiders side. And I suppose the only other thing there is they did have him in that type of role with Smithies, playing a little bit more of a middle forward rotation in the prop forward rotation, sorry. And it could definitely happen again this week with Tarpany out, but I do think it might be an interchangeable type of role, and it's going to be dependent on how many minutes Horsburgh plays and how many minutes Smithies plays. And I think Horsburgh at least gets 60 or 59 like he did last week in this one, and Smithies could be anywhere between 60 to 80, just depending on which role they decide to play him in. Horsburgh is one of the best buys of the week. He's no must-have. He could easily come out and get 57, and yes, he makes some cash. Yes, that's a good score, and he's priced at 42, and that would be 15 above where his break-even is at. But he could easily come out and get 50 as well. If he gets 50, not the end of the world if you did want to wait one more week, and there's no big rush to get Horsburgh if you can't get him now. What I would suggest is not to break up your team of good players. There's obviously guys that are in the early to mid 400s that haven't scored really well that could definitely be solid sells, but there's also other guys that people are trying to sell to get Horsburgh that doesn't make sense, and they could score better than Horsburgh this week. All those types of things can happen, but I think he's a terrific buy, and we know his stats when he plays in this 60-minute or plus role. He can get near a 60 score on a regular basis, and we saw him over 60 in that lock role when he played big minutes. So it'll be interesting to see the next 2 weeks how many minutes he plays, but following that, we should see him around that 60 going forward, and he's an absolute jet in that scenario. 547k for Toby Couchman. What about the 70 minutes that were on offer for him? That was massive, and well done on him for taking that option up and being their biggest minute forward. This week, I don't expect it to be the same minutes, and if he can get anywhere in the mid-50s, it's probably a high 40s score, and I do expect him to be closer to that high 40s than what we saw with the 58 in that 70 minutes. And look, if he happens to be a 60 to 65 minute guy, then I think he's a really good buy this week. But they also miss next week, and you can easily watch this week at that dual position and go from there. I also expect him to score pretty well this week and be annoying for anyone who didn't take him. Forgot to mention Emre Gula later on. I don't think I put him in there, but he's a guy that played big minutes as well in the mid-50s, and I definitely didn't expect that. There was a bit of an uptick, and if he goes back into the 40s, we should expect him to be at the high 30s mark and be probably a little bit of an annoying buy-in if you didn't purchase him. So that's Couchman and Gula. Alex 12, for those who were interested in him, in round 1, it paid off beautifully. Priced at 40, I think he can average closer to the 50 and has a lovely runway of time out there. Did get 50 minutes, and if it's anywhere in the 40s, it's frustrating. If it's 50 and above, we know that he's got plenty of good base stats in him, and if he can get anywhere near that 2 offloads a game, which is probably a little bit out of hand for him, given he has a lot of 0 games across 2024. Probably don't expect that going forward, and if it is 50 minutes, you may see some 45s and stuff in there, which would be a little bit annoying. So that's where it's hard to buy guys after round 1, because they've already had a little bit of a price rise, and then they have to continue doing what they have done in round 1, which for someone like Tom Gilbert at 529k can be a little bit easier. He's obviously a little bit cheaper. He has the dual. He's the captain of the club, and we do expect him to be anywhere between 55 and 65 minutes. And what was crazy with Gilbert is the highest tackle number that he's had at lock outside of that game of 59 tackles was 42. So 17 more tackles he made. I think the meters gained was really, really awesome for Tommy there. And we'll just filter that one for his lock games. And it's wild that he had an 80-minute game for 35 points. You just don't expect that from him. Looking at how he played on the weekend, you just can't expect that to be a regular thing for Tommy Gilbert. he looked better. He looks so keen, obviously missing plenty of time. And that 56 minutes, I think, can go to 60, can go to 62. And if he plays anything like that, then yeah, you could hope for about 100 meters and maybe 40 odd tackles. He's got the odd chance of more attack. He had an offload. He had one tackle break. There's no other attacking stats. So like that could go up. He had a penalty. Definitely some negatives in there, and you can see there he has anywhere between that sort of 3 to 6 and 7 missed tackles a game at lock, apart from a couple of those in 2023. So that's where it can be a little bit annoying, is those missed tackles and the negatives. I personally would pick Horsburgh over Gilbert just because we've seen Horsburgh do it more. But you see here 49 average in those games, including the 65. But if you look between 50 and 70, which I did before, it's like a 52. And if you're buying him dual position to get 10 plus points of value, he's actually owned by a lot in the top 5,000. So well done to those guys. I think he's a really good purchase. Doesn't have a buy for a long time and should be back in Origin. But by that point, you can make a decision on selling him to another gun or something like that. So Gilbert, a really good purchase this week. This would be the week to get him. I don't know if you can wait one more because he'll be up. If he gets a 50 odd again, he'll be up at 550k, price at 41. A little bit frustrating from there to pick someone up that doesn't have the pedigree of being 50 plus long term. But at the moment, a really good purchase. Had to mention Greg Marzhew just because he's under 500k. Even with that little run here of Dolphins into Titans and then the bye, I think you could purchase him hoping that he does get to about a 47, 48 average. And that's still 10 points of value, even with that buy. So if you didn't jump on Lucas, if you don't have Ponga or something like that, and you're sitting with like 0 or 1 Knight in your team, I think Greg is still a really good purchase. He looked great. Offloading 4 times was pretty crazy. 167 run meters, the 5 tackle breaks, and picked up a try as well. So there'll be games where he gets more tackle breaks. Probably should get less offloads, but if you can score a try every second week or get that sort of 3 in every 4 weeks he scores a try, I think Greg will be really solid. AJ Brimson comes into calculations this week as well, with the other counterparts that I did mention in guys like Campbell and also Keeney. Brimson is a cheap guy, and unfortunately he won't get the duel, given they didn't name a round one side, obviously. So Brimson, a really good guy to look at this week at 482. I wouldn't go sideways trade anyone to him yet. Brimson still has to come out and do it, and it is against the Dogs this week, who are obviously a really solid team. And I think he has a nice run of games. That's why I ended up downgrading Preston to him. Allowed me to make moves this week, and I think he's a really solid guy to own. Decent amount of people picked him up. Almost 17% of the top 5k did start with him or looped him in. I'd watch this week, but if you have a clear upgrade, like David Moale, Jazz Savanga potentially, Takeaho got an injury. Turns out it was a knock to the knee. Those kind of guys, if you want to go to Brimson and you need wing fullback, you want wing fullback improvement or cover, then that's great for sure. Aaron Clark, 477k, not super excited with the PPM that he ended up with, but good run meters, had no tackle breaks, did have an offload to ground, but low tackles, and that should improve, obviously. But for him, we know that he had that stretch of games at Titans where he was awesome, but is that going to be able to happen long term? I don't think so, personally. And that's the worry with him, is that his PPM will be a little bit down. He also had Fish and Barnett play limited minutes, I think floor minutes for them. So where does those minutes come from? Is it Aaron Clark going back to 40? Potentially. Tom Starling, he's a guy I have pretty high in my rankings this week, to be honest with you. 468k, picked up the 51 last week in 68 minutes, and I think he played well enough to keep that role. He did have 3 missed tackles, and that's something that when he does play bigger minutes, you can expect against some of the better teams. You see here 3-3-5-2, 3-3-8 in games where he did play the big minutes. So look at that as a pretty normal sort of stat line. There will be other games where he goes 40 plus in tackles compared to this 33 when they had the ball plenty, and that could be this week. But he could also miss a bunch with Carrigan, Payne Haas, these types of guys running at him through the middle, which would be a scary prospect. He had a line break as well, which might not happen long term, but we know when he plays big minutes, and he came on and played some 13 as well, or some middle minutes to finish, that he is going to be a high 40s guy. And in that scenario of price at 35, he's a really good guy if you want another hooker in your side that you can bring in at 468. It's not too expensive, but I think this is the week that you have to do it. before his, if he gets another 49, he's up near 500k, and it's a bit tough to select Tom Starling, in my opinion, at 500k, and he was a really good purchase to begin the season with. So shout out to everyone who did that. Tuipulotu, 464k, end up with a 74 there and a 50, almost 50k price rise. 9 tackle breaks, the 3 tries, good run meters, an offload to ground as well. He started really well, and this left side's going to be great. There are going to be games where he picks up 3 tries, like we just saw, but that was in round 19 last year. He got 72. His next 3 games, he went 32, 25, and 22. So that could easily happen. I find it very hard to select him now priced at 35 as a winger when he hasn't done it for a long period of time. He's had the odd good game, but he hasn't had stretches of time like Greg Marzu has to be able to continue that, and he's got the bye next week as well. So it's a tough one. I think he's better option in the centre wings in Supercoach for sure. Satili Tupanua at 439k, and look at us get through this. We're going to be a long one today, that's for sure. Mid and edge duel, obviously, for Satili. A cracking start, and he's not going to score 2 tries a week, that's for sure. But I think he looks even better, and if he can get over 100 metres again, there'll be more tackles some games. He should have tackle breaks and running those good lines. He'll score the odd try if he plays anything like that. But priced at 33 with 40 minutes, he needs to go a point a minute plus to be worth it, and I can't see it happening on a regular basis. So for me, it's a no. If you want to take the plunge with the dual position, then great, but he did cook us last year as well. Luke Metcalf, here we go, 429k for him. The worry is going to be, how does this get replicated? Manly this week, he's on the slightly less worse side with Burbo compared to Olaquatu, for sure. 24 in round 1. My issue with this is the kick meters are at 339, which will be fairly similar, I think, to what he could get this week. Meters gained, he had at 70, so he'll be anywhere between, I think, 60 to 120, 130. He did have a turnover tackle, which isn't going to happen on the regular basis. He had 18 tackles, so he'll probably make close to 20. Will he miss 3 or 4, or will he miss 5? We don't know, but he should miss a few per game, for sure. So there could be there's unlikely to be improvements on kick meters, only a potential for a small increase in meters gained. The turnover tackle might go away, so let's just say the turnover and the meters gained is fairly similar. He had no offloads, no tackle breaks. I think that'll increase. Could potentially have less missed tackles and probably 1 less error per game. So if you look at that in itself, it's probably anywhere between 5 to 10 points of base that you could see as an increase against most teams if they don't get spanked, but they also might. And he had 0 attacking stats. So there's potential that he gets to a 45. That's an extra 20 points in that 5 to 10 in base I was talking about. And then some attacking stats with tackle breaks, offloads, assists, tries, and goals, right? There's all that to be added. It's just going to be the question of, can they score points? They have a bye in round 5, and then it's Melbourne Broncos. If you're holding him, I think he's an easy hold if you don't need Humphreys, Horsburgh, these types of guys. For Manly this week could be hard. I don't think he'll miss as many on that side, but it's still Kohler, it's still Brooks. These kind of guys are good runners of the footy. And then it's Roosters, and that's the Tigers. And against the Roosters, he's up against Crichton and Nwangani Tuwaze, which will be tough in itself. And then the Tigers the following week, he's up against guys like Dewey, Samuel Afenu, Jerome Luai, these types of players. So not super excited about Metcalf. I'm personally looking to potentially sell him. He's owned by a good chunk of people, but obviously guys that did well didn't own him in this first week. In the top 100 anyway, 33 teams only had him. 50% in the top 1,000, 61% in the top 5,000. So not fully owned, which is pretty crazy. And I'm interested to see how he goes this week, but I think you can easily sell him. If you go on a Humphreys or something like that, it's a no-brainer. Kobe Hetherington, 418 for him. He did end up with a line break this week. Great run meters. And I think you can switch some of those run meters out for tackles this week coming against Canberra. I'm not expecting him to have line breaks, and I personally think he's a mid-30s guy, priced at 31. So if you need him to sell to one of these guys, I would. Do you have to double trade with him? Potentially. But guys like Hetherington, guys like Davy Moale, I think Davy obviously definitely should be sold. Hetherington can be held for 1 more week at least before you make any decisions. If it's a more of a base stat game, then I think he'll do well. For Davy, 14 in 29 minutes. It's pretty gross. It's not something you want to be too happy holding in your side, and I'm personally selling, and I think you should too. It's pretty simple with Davy on that one. Finifuaki, he's out for 1 week with the head knock. So he looks really, really good. And with Lemuelu being out, I do expect Finn to play really high minutes. And for him, with 5 tackle breaks in that first game, 121 meters, that's massive. And I'm very excited to see him go against some of these other, mid-tier sides like Tigers, like Titans. He does have Broncos, Penrith, and Melbourne in there, but his base was really solid. They were giving him plenty of footy. So I think he can score in that mid-40s pretty comfortably. Priced at 30, he has to be a hold. Kelma Tuolangi, 404. He's been dropped now. Just sell him. Simple as that. Get rid of him. We move on. Yeah, not even close. Humphreys, 403k. We've had 2 games from him. He had a beautiful try-scoring game in his one for Manly last year. He did have 24 tackles and 4 misses. I think he's improved from that. So I do think that sort of somewhere in the mid-20s tackles-wise, they will run at him. And he's on a tougher side this week with Val Holmes, Tuipulotu, those types of guys, Luciano Leilua, who are really good. So I definitely expect him to miss some tackles this week. Did have an offload, only ran a little bit with the kick meters and the tackles alone. You should be able to get in the 40s. Any attacking stats from there, any goals, which I think it'll be a high enough scoring affair, like, Charity Shield, obviously. And he scored well against them in the Charity Shield. So I think he's a must-have this week. He was a must-have round 1. He's a must-have round 2. Don't see Dodd coming in and stealing his spot. So get him in your side, in my opinion. Clear as day. If you want a different opinion on him, don't listen to me, because I'm all in and have been for a while since that second trial since that Charity Shield on the Jamie Go Freeze buffs. Jazz Savanga, 395 for him. The score was terrible, basically, and at 395, get him straight to Humphreys, get him to a cheapie, whatever you want to do with Jazz. A very, very easy one. He played hooker, didn't play a lot through the middle, hardly ran the footy. If that is anything like what we're going to see going forward, then that would be frustrating, because you need him making 100 plus run meters, getting tackle breaks, getting attacking stats. It didn't happen. You could easily hold 1 more week, but I think selling is a great option as well. Jesse Arthurs, I'm seeing him in being his growth basically in people's teams, and had a 53 in a really good spot on the weekend. And you see there it's Canberra, which will be harder for him. Cowboys into Dolphins into Tigers and Roosters, and then Warriors. So it's a pretty nice run for Broncos players, and this is where I'd look at certain guys. And personally, I would go Shibasaki before I'd go for Arthurs, because we know Arthurs has a really terrible history of scoring well, and he's now priced at 28 after that nice, basically 30k price rise. He had 3 line breaks, 2 assists, and a try. Not going to happen regularly. I fully expect him to go 30 or 31 this week, and you'll be a bit frustrated as an owner, even with the dual position. He's just an awkward price, and it's a hard one to lock in. Nawangani Tawaze, we've seen a couple of games from him in the NRL now. 10 tackles. He's only had 20 tackles for 1 miss across the 2 games. 3 offloads, 120 run meters with 118 and 122 across those 2 games, and 9 tackle breaks with that 1 try, and he's averaging 40. So if you haven't bought him yet, I think this is probably not the week to do it against Penrith, but the following one, if he keeps that spot, we see Billy Smith in New South Wales Cup. He could be a really interesting downgrade option or an upgrade from one of the cheapies if things don't work out. So keep marking your thoughts. If you do own him, I think it's fine to play. Obviously, it's against Penrith, so him, Rob Toya, do you want to have both of them playing against the Panthers? You may not have a choice, to be honest with you. So mark a really solid guy to hold and own, I think, this year. Jack Bird, 26 and 52 minutes. I think he definitely improves this week. It's 6 missed tackles, which is gross, and an error. Only the 2 tackle breaks, so low attack stats from him. I think their other numbers in 27 tackles, 90 meters gained is all solid, but I expect the odd offload. I expect more tackle breaks. I expect some type of attack, which would be ideal as well. And Jack Bird went to the right edge as well, where I think it was pretty dire in that last 15 minutes in general. On that right-hand side, they weren't getting a lot of ball. But Jack Bird, a really good guy that you can sell. I think holding is completely fine as well. He's priced at where he scored last week, and I expect him to go high 30s this week and do a really good job. But that 26 is not exciting at all. Oren Keeley, my boy. So excited to see him play this weekend, but with Finn coming back and how well he played, I can't see this spot opening up unless we see a longer term injury from, Plath or something like that, which we definitely don't want to see because we loved him last year. But Keely, look in those interchange minutes last year, 35 in 38, 46 in 49, 40 in 52 in the back end of last year as well. So he's a workhorse. He scores like 50 plus in Q Cup. Excited to see him play, but it's going to be very hard to buy him this week off the back of getting 1 week. Shibasaki, he's now in a really good side, and he dealt with some cramps at the back end of that game, but sounds like he's all good. 54 for him, 12 tackles, no misses, good run meters. Did have one mistake there, unfortunately, but got a turnover tackle, got line break assist tries. He got it all. Comes up against the Canberra Raiders. I think it'll be a harder task for him. I expect he'll do okay, but as I just mentioned with Arthur's, the run of games that they have afterwards is really, really good. So Shiba in a really good spot to continue scoring well. Priced at 25, I think a mid-30s to high 30s is very, very gettable for Shibasaki, and a great hold, a great purchase round 1 in the end. And if you do want to buy him and you need some center cover, then Shibasaki, a really good purchase this week. Tamale, 329k. He's got the center and the wing fullback dual. 49 in his first game, a tremendous New South Wales Cup record, and we obviously spoke about him ages ago because they played so long ago. A terrific pick this week. I personally think he keeps his spot. If he doesn't, it would be really strange, and it's probably off the back of the Broncos absolutely trouncing them down his wing, and then they go, oh, we probably change that because defensively he's not good enough. But I do think he's a strong enough body in contact that he should be okay out there if he can, if they do get him one-on-one with the Broncos' great outside backs and Reece Walsh and these kind of guys, that they've got so much attack, and we'll see how it goes. But his go forward out of the red zone, so important to this team in my opinion, and I personally wouldn't change it. And Abba Hopewadi's been training in the centers, so I think if you miss this one, you do correct it. He could make, if he scores mid 30s to 40, he'll make another 30k and continue to do a great job. And then he is up against Manly the following week, which is up against their tough side for sure. But then it's Cowboys, and they do have a fairly tough run. There's no if buts about it, but they are also a pretty solid team. So I think you get him in, you make that decision, and you correct that. There's so many buys though, so it's hard to, if you got no Humphreys, no Tamale, no Horsburgh, all these types of guys, Gilbert, it's going to be hard to make that decision. And that's where being in the private group really helps. We can help you with your team, your setup, and all the info is in the description, guys, if you want to check that out to join. I dropped the prices as well yesterday, which is really cool. But that's where we'll go through your team and stuff. It's hard I don't have these questions, I don't have your teams in front of me, so I'm just going to give you the information, and you're going to have to make your decision on that one. And please trust your gut. Don't get annoyed at content creators for steering you in the wrong direction. I steered you in the wrong direction with Moali at a shocker, but Jamie Humphreys was a must-have. So the combination of those two, it can pay off. And some people blindly follow me with Humphreys. It could have been the same with Moali, and we win some and we lose more, as they say on all the gambling ads. But Corey Pakes there, 311k with the pretty low break even, obviously priced at 33. He did score a try, and he had 22 tackles for 3 misses. And these are kind of the numbers I was expecting from him. It's usually lower tackles, but if he's trying to get involved in that side, he will miss the odd tackle. He's not going to run much out of dummy half, given they have so many weapons, and he played 57 minutes. So for him, I do expect somewhere in that 50s minutes. I don't think it's enough to buy him. I think it's an easy hold. If you do need to make some moves to go up and down to get someone, then I do understand selling Corey Pakes, but it's not something that I think you need to do. Rob Toya, what a weird time to buy him. I think he's 4% in gain, basically, but a negative 7 or 8 break even, 12, whatever it is, something crazy for Rob Toya. 61 in the first game against a team where they got smacked. So definitely didn't get enough ball, as coach said, so hopefully he does get plenty more. And it's up against an edge that isn't going to be too crazy, to be honest. Cole, you've got Alamotti back there, which is going to be a fun one, a fun tussle for sure. And they do get Brian To'o back, but he's going to be on the right side, so they'll have Casey McLean back on that side. So I don't think it's too tough a matchup for Toya. Obviously the team is, but it's a newer side for sure. So I think he's sweet to play this week. You need to make sure you do own him, because a negative 12 break even, then coming up against some easier teams following that, make sure you get him in. Jack Josefsky, 276. How good? Well, it's asking me if I considered therapy. Yes, always. 276 for him with the low break even. He picked up a 43 with a try. Meters gained were up, which is good. Tackle numbers 13 for 1 miss. Didn't have to make a lot of tackles, but this is kind of him. He doesn't make a tremendous amount of tackles. He can be in the 30s and 80 minutes. He could also be in the mid to late 20s very easily. If they're going to continue to play well, he'll have opportunities in attack like he saw. And at 276k, I definitely see him averaging in the mid 30s. And it doesn't look like Piku is going to take too many minutes off him. So a fun pick if you need a cheap guy. 30% own the top 1,000, 28 in the top 5,000. No must have. I think he'll do a really solid job though. And definitely be solid for you. One person I didn't put in here was Kurt Donahue, who I am pretty high on personally. I think the situation that he found himself in on the weekend was really, really good for him. 42 minutes. There was a couple of HIAs in that game with Daniel Saifidi and then Finafuyaki as well. But he did come on for Felice Kafusi and played through the middle. He had 10 minutes when they were able to get JMK off for a little bit, where he played at 9, but the rest of it, he was just a running middle forward. 30 tackles for 0 misses. It's probably not going to happen on a regular basis, but him in the middle, I think is going to be more helpful than him out on an edge for missed tackles. He still had an error. He didn't have any attacking stats and picked up a 38. So I personally think he's a good purchase. We just don't exactly know how many minutes it's going to be. We saw there 55 minutes off the bench. Last year, he had 40 points. He had a 32 in 30. He did have an 8 in 35, but he wasn't playing through the middle. So you look at those games where he had good tackle numbers and he can easily get in the 30s. And I think he's a better player this year than last. And if there is any injuries to guys like Hammer, he'll go and play fullback. If JMK gets injured, he'll play 9. And they're two really good positions for him at 271k. So you could get, I suppose, unlucky and he goes to like 30 minutes and he doesn't make much cash. He could stick at 40 minutes in the middle and be great. He could get an injury to number 9, to number 1 or number 6. And I think he could slot in there very easily and do well. So he's an interesting one. I think it's a bit of like a Tyron Wishart type of situation with Kurt Donahue at 271. And just ask Bevan how that played out for him when he got a little bit of luck with Tyron Wishart, by putting yourself in the right position for sure. Lockie Hubner, 266k. He had a pretty solid start. Yes, he missed tackles. Yes, he had an error. Yes, he had a penalty. But 34 points in 60 minutes. He's a guy that you want in your side at 266k. And majority of people got him. He's in the 2/3 basically of the top 5,000 did jump on. And he's an easy guy that you can buy. Would I buy him over Goz? I put my rankings in the private group space there. I've got them close, to be honest with you, on Mr. Hubner and co. Hamish Stewart, we've got him at 257k, and then Celesi as well, Fiketti at 256. So they're the two guys that you're comparing at that price point. I also haven't put Kai O'Donnell in this list, guys. I don't think we're going to see Jeremiah and I out of this side for too long, but I do expect Kai to do pretty well at his cheap price. The 42 and 43 minutes for Hamish Stewart was a really good effort. What we saw from him was just great tackle numbers and the whole Dragon side. His meters gauge should increase, and I do expect his tackle numbers to drop down as well. Just with the way that game was played, they all had crazy tackle numbers and terrible running numbers. Had a turnover tackle, had a tackle break. He's a guy that you could easily expect 30 to 33 minutes, in my opinion. And in that scenario, he's probably a high 20s guy and has 10 points of value in him at 257k. But what's going to happen with Eisenhuth? We obviously lose Ryan Couchman, and that helped him get minutes in this game. But how's that going to go longer term for someone like Hamish Stewart? I'm not sure. But a solid pick as a cheapie. Celestia Fiketti. So we have him at 256k. Played 52 minutes, and he had more minutes than guys like Blake Steep, who is more of a genuine prop. Fiketti is a really young 13. He's a guy that can slot into that position and has played it through the grades. And that's why I think he got the bigger minutes, because he's used to playing more minutes, whereas the other guys aren't as much. But he did have 2 turnover tackles. So if you take, let's just say, one of those out, it's 37, which is nice. But the question with Fiketti is the situation with guys like Nat Butcher and Victor Radley. So Radley should be back next week. Butcher will be back in the next few weeks. And if that's the case and there's less minutes available, I think Fiketti goes back to like the 30 odd. This will be the last chance to buy him, in my opinion. Guys like Nafahu White are clear holds this week. who we were able to speak about. I don't know why I ended up not speaking about. Where's my boy Seyfarth? Wow, I didn't even speak about Seyfarth. Let's fix that one up right now, ladies and gents. I don't know why. I thought I'd put him in here, but did not. So Seyfarth is on everyone's lips, obviously, but Nafahu White a clear hold. Seyfarth at 466k. We just need to go back and look at those second row spots for him before we get to those last guys. Sorry for that. I missed out on that one. Including low minute games, 47 minutes for 32 points. Tackle numbers are really high for him at 38.5. And he had 32 on the weekend. And that was the lowest meters gained he had apart from one game against the Sea Eagles. But he still picked up a 41 in those 80 minutes there. I definitely expect more than that 29 that we saw from him, and I'm personally going to give him another crack, dual position, owned by a decent amount without being crazy. You take out that 29, I think you get a 41 plus this week out of Seyfarth, but the worry is obviously getting those meters gained. We want better tackle numbers on that side. The game was played on the other, unfortunately, and for myself having Dylan Lucas and Seyfarth on the one side, it was a little bit frustrating on that one. Tackle numbers wise, but hopefully that doesn't improve and they fix things up. So Seyfarth, a really good hold this week. I do understand if you want to sell, but I'm not personally, I don't think. So Fekete, finishing with him, minutes wise is a bit of a worry after the next few weeks. Nafahu White's going to get good minutes over the next bit. Siwa Wong, same deal, some good minutes over the next bit. He could be a sell later, but is not now and is not a buy. And Fekete, up to you on that one. Kind of a last ditch decision, I think, to get him at that price point, and I'd go for other players in that cheapy list. Start for Toa. I did start with him, so he's in my side, and I think he could be a pretty good play. Like, you've got him and Rob Toya. You probably back Toya with the pedigree, but Stafford at 250k against Para doesn't sound too bad, and the next 3 games for them are Para, Dolphins, and Warriors, so that's where I think he's a pretty good purchase. At 250k, you just haven't seen it yet. He hasn't got the lower break even like some of the other guys, so you could definitely watch a week. And he had injuries in 3 games, the 3 games that he played last year, which is super frustrating for him. And defensively, I think he'll be sweet this year. Are they going to give him footy on the right-hand side? That's my question, and it's probably why I'm going to avoid playing Seyfarth and Toa, but he'll be in my side, sitting on the emergencies most likely, and we'll lock in Rob Toya, I think, in the centres. Now I'm thinking about it. And if Stafford plays well and goes well, I'll be happy with that, even if he does outscore Rob Toya and I'm not playing him. So a solid guy to own. You see back here in 2023, before the injuries, he had really good games, 37, 47, 61, 37, 26, 41, 101 against the Cows and giving Val Holmes a bath. 40-odd, 30-odd, so really good games in 2023 before the injuries last year. So that's why he came straight back into the squad, and I hope that he does well. Should do pretty well at 250. If you have guys like Jack Cole, Sandon Smith, I think you make sure you do. Probably you need to try and get Sandon Smith. You probably should have started with him. And you hope that he goes poor against Panthers, to be fair, and clear his side. Cole, an easy hold this week as well. And then to finish things off, guys, thanks so much for getting through to the end. If you did get through to the end, let me know your thoughts on Riley Smith, because he's the last person on this list. So thank you for checking this one out, and I'll give you a little love heart for commenting back there. If you made it all the way to the end, appreciate it. The voice is starting to go. 21 for him in the 53 minutes last week, but the massive win was the 53 minutes. Can he continue with that? And if he does, I'll be buying him most likely next week. Some extra solid hooker cover. He can play Watson in the middle, that kind of thing. And we know that he can have better games against slightly less difficult opponents. We've only really got Manly in this list, so I think will be tough. But for him, 26 tackles, 2 misses. He had 2 errors as well. He ran the footy a little bit, kicked a little bit. He'll be fine. I think he'll be in the mid-30s pretty quickly if he can get anywhere near this 53 minutes. And he was dealing with cramps at the end and stuff like that. So not ideal there. But you would have got my Supercoach video that's come out. You get the buy, hold, sell. And I'm just going to do a short, sharp one, which is actually just going to help me with my social media content, which I'll focus on the guys that are most popular as, quick buy, hold, sell. For hopefully get to 5 minutes would be ideal, just for the guys that can't get through all of this. Just the super popular guys I'll go through in that one, which will be fun. And you'll see this video every single Wednesday, about midday, something like that, which will be good fun. And thanks so much for everyone for sticking through this one. It's been a super long, super fun one, and I hope it was fun, and good luck with your teams.